Good afternoon. This is Friday, the 22nd of August, 3:20 in the afternoon, 3:20 p.m. I'm James Exum. My yoga name is Sakshi, which means the witness. It's also the name I gave to my soul, my lovely, lovely soul. I'll be reading today from chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, Yasa's wisdom revealed through Shankara. This will be a comparative discourse, and it's copyrighted August 2025, all rights reserved. And let us begin. What I've been doing, a personal note, what I've been doing lately is I have allowed voiceovers as narratives for the first 3 of these readings, having to do with the Gita and going chapter by chapter. There's 18 chapters now, and I'm going 1, 2, 3, etc. up to 18. The first 3 were read to you with a stationed background, so to speak, of my art studio, which is behind me over there. And what I was doing in those videos was I was just allowing my voice to recover. I had a really bad episode the other night of incredibly acidic acid reflux, and it burned the inside of my throat and my tongue and my vocal cords, it seemed, if they're available to that type of reaction. But anyway, I was sort of out of communication as far as speaking publicly for those first few narratives. I'm trying to reach my goal of 50 videos by my 75th birthday, which is coming up on September the 30th. I'm about halfway there now. I did the last one, in my own voice, again using that still backdrop, and here I am live. What I'm doing today is reading from my monitor. These are my own writings. I produced this series of, I'm producing this series of 18 discourses on an intensive study of the individual chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And it was originally written by Yasa, who also wrote the great Mahabharata, as you well know, I'm sure. And this is the Gita is an extraction from that great work, the Mahabharata. For any background information, you're welcome to go to Yogipedia, you're welcome to go to Wikipedia. I'm not going to go into those today. I'm trying to save both of us time and effort, myself effort and you time, by creating a less than 20 to 30 minute video for you. This is on chapter 5, as I said, and I'll begin my introduction now. And I'll read partially, and then I'll also ad lib as I go through this, if you don't mind. And thank you for your attention and your time. And thank you for coming to visit my site. It's a growing site. I'm finally getting a little bit of traction now, it seems, and I'm happy to do it. It's been one of the joys of my life so far. The Bhagavad Gita was composed by the sage Vasya, and it stands out as a luminous jewel in the crown of world spiritual literature, and truly it does. It truly does. Literature. Its 18 chapters span a spectrum of philosophical thought, ethical dilemmas, and spiritual insight. This chapter, chapter 5, is named Sannyasa Yoga, or renunciation and action. It delves into the perennial debate between renunciation, sannyasa, and the path of selfless action, karma yoga. Well, I'm an old sannyasa. I'm a retired yogi. You go through 4 stages. You go through the student stage. You go through the householder stage. You go through the senior stage. Then you go into the retirement stage. Well, I'm in the retirement stage, as I just mentioned. This illuminated Yasa's this path of karma yoga, and now to illuminate Yasa's wisdom, one must contemplate the commentaries of Shankara, the eminent Advaita Vedantin, and draw from modern interpreters such as myself, who is known as Sakshi, and I try to bring Gita's universal relevance into contemporary light. As I said, I'll read and ad-lib as I go. So the contextual setting of chapter 5 is at the heart of chapter 5, and it lies in a sense with Arjuna's persistent questioning of Lord Shiva. They're next to a battlefield. Arjuna is the young prince. He's also a noted archer. Lord Shiva has incarnated himself and is serving as Arjuna's driver and teacher while here on earth. And Arjuna is torn between the call to action and the allure of renunciation. And Arjuna asks Krishna, this is part of the text now, which is superior, the renunciation of action or the performance of action with detachment? So in a way, what's happening in that chariot at the location of that great battlefield is what happens in each one of our human lives. There's lessons to be learned, and there's reluctance, and there's boldness, and there's ignorance, and there's wisdom. And forgive my relaxed setting today. I'm in a different position than I normally am, but I am reading, as I said, from my monitor. So the answer to that question of the renunciation of action or the performance of action with detachment, the dialogue then pivots on to the means to liberation, or what's known in yogic terminology as moksha, and the nature of true wisdom. Well, yoga is, one of the definitions of yoga is the search for true wisdom. And that's important to note, folks, because we've had enough ignorance on this planet already, so now we need a little bit of true wisdom. I would think you would agree with that. I hope you would. I'm adjusting my screen here because, again, I'm kind of new to all of this, and it looks kind of okay. One more. There you go. I'm an old artist, poet, writer, yogi, philosopher, sculptor, researcher. In other words, I'm a polymath, P-O-L-Y-M-A-T-H. So Yasa's poetic genius treads together the teachings of Krishna, who asserts that both Sannyasa and karma yoga, when practiced with the right understanding, lead to ultimate freedom. Well, ultimate freedom is what yoga is about. The freedom of the soul from bondage and the freedom from samsara, the rebirth cycle, where souls come back to earth and try to work out their problems and their morals and ethics so that when they finally reach moksha, they can reunite with the Creator and not have to come back into this drama and comedy-filled world. The emphasis, however, is on the spirit in which the action is performed, the relinquishing of attachment and ego. I'm using my mouse here to scroll down. I'm not used to doing this. Forgive me. Okay, so Shankara next takes on the subject of Advaita Vedanta and the unity of paths. Adi Shankara, that was his first name, whose commentary on the Gita is both rigorous and compassionate, interprets chapter 5 through the lens of a non-dualist. Advaita. A non-dualist is a person that doesn't believe that God is up here and we are down here. A non-dualist believes that We are a spark of God as a soul being hosted by the human body while it exists on this planet. So we're basically a part of God. We're not separate from God. Most religions teach that God is on high and we are his little creations here on earth, born of original sin and so forth and so on. Well, I'm not going there. I'm teaching philosophy, not religion. Keep this in mind. I teach the philosophy of yoga. That's my main thread that runs through all of my videos, is that one subject matter. For Shankara, the dichotomy between renunciation and action is resolved in a higher knowledge of the self, the Atman. The Atman, like Brahman, the creator, is neither born nor dies. We are eternal. The soul and God are eternal. So he gives a few examples here, which he has taken from the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya, which was translated by Swami Gambhirananda. That's much better. Renunciate, and here's some of the points. Renunciation is knowledge. Shankara explains that sannyasa is not merely the abandonment of the external action, but the abandonment of external action, but the renunciation of the sense of doership, identifying oneself as the agent of action. True renunciation is internal, rooted in the realization of non-difference between the self and the Brahman. As I was just saying, we're really no different. We're just on loan as a portion of Brahma, a spark of the divine within the human body, while the human body lives on the earth. Once the body dies, like casting off an old suit of clothes, the soul goes on. The destination depends on the activities of the soul while it was on earth, how much of the unbinding it was able to accomplish from samsara. Karma yoga, he also states, as preparation, action when performed selflessly purifies the mind. That's a very important statement. Karma yoga, when performed selflessly, purifies the mind. Karma yoga serves as an essential discipline for those not yet established in knowledge. Well, most of us are not established in our knowledge. I'm a little bit ahead of y'all, chronologically. Well, no fault of yours, of course, being young or near my age. We're all born when we're supposed to be. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. And he also says that when we are endowed with wisdom of the non-attachment, then there is a non-difference to the ultimate realization. The fruit of both paths, verse 5.6 says, now this is chapter 5, verse 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, says, quote, renunciation, O mighty arm, that's another name for Arjuna, that Lord Shiva speaks of him in various names, is hard to obtain without yoga. Renunciation is hard to attain without yoga. The yoga-yoked sage swiftly goes to Brahman. In other words, yoga actually, in the ancient Sanskrit, the basic meaning of the word yoga is union. So the yoga-yoked, one who is yoked as a sage to Brahman, swiftly goes to Brahman. In other words, if you leave this world in that mindset and with that yogic history, then you're assured of reuniting with the Maker, with God Himself. Shankara sees this as an affirmation that action tempered by wisdom is the more accessible path for most seekers. Affirmation that action tempered by wisdom is the more accessible path for most seekers. Okay. Now there's an integration of Shankara's vision and of the author of the Bhagavad Gita intent when he wrote that section of the great Mahabharata. Vyasa's subtle genius lies in synthesizing diverse yogic paths. Shankara recognized this, insists that the apparent conflict in chapter 5 is designed to address seekers of various temperaments. The unity of purpose, liberation from bondage, is the Gita's reframe, echoing through Shankara's commentaries. Well, I agree with that 100%. Now we go to my perspective. I am Exum, I am Sakshi, the old yogi, the old distractor by going off subject. But I'm also teaching when I go off subject. Don't take my tangents as being old and infirm or going senile. It's just my way of inclusively teaching a very broad spectrum within a confined amount of time to you as my viewers and those that have become my students. That would be wonderful if you do. I'm not looking for students, but if you want to go there, then you're more than welcome. I also write, it says, I have written under the name of Sakshi, and I have sought to make the Bhagavad Gita accessible to a global audience. Well, this is why I started out. My goal before I leave this earth is to transcribe through these videos the important portions of the accumulative knowledge I have gained over 50 years of doing philosophical research on comparative religions, comparative religious philosophies, and more importantly, focusing in on how they relate to yoga philosophy. That's a mouthful, but that's what I've done, and this is what I'm trying to transmit to the internet audience before I leave this planet. I'm 75. My last checkup with my doctor told me, except for the maladies I have that are chronic, I'm in very good health according to my blood analysis and so forth. So I draw upon the Eastern and the Western traditions, and you will see that if you go back and look at some of my earlier videos, more especially the group of videos that has to do with the history of yoga. And here's some of my points of wisdom in action. Action in the world, I underscore, as the Gita's advised to perform one's duties without attachment to results. This is echoing Krishna's admonition that let not your attachment be to inaction, and that's chapter 5, verse 7. Integration of social and spiritual life. I note that the Gita does not advocate withdrawal from the world, but encourages quite the opposite, engagement with the world. You're not withdrawing from the world by becoming more devout in your studies of yoga. You are actually engaging on a much higher and civil level with the world by accomplishing that. The wisdom of Yasa, I suggest, lies in the affirmation that the spiritual progress is compatible with a dynamic lifestyle. Now, I truly believe this. And you say, well, I'm looking at this old man. He doesn't look very dynamic to me. Well, compare me to a lot of other 75-year-old men that are out there and what they're doing nowadays, and you will see the comparison holds up. Universal relevance. Like Shankara, I see chapter 5 as dissolving the boundaries between the mediator and the worker, the recluse and the householder. The path to wisdom is not linear, but encompasses both stillness and action, each informing and enriching the other. My reading about how to gain liberation will go as such. My commentary often returns to the theme of equanimity, as expressed in chapter 5:18. The wise look with equal vision upon a Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, or even an outcast. This radical vision of sameness, rooted in realization of oneself, is the fruit of both renunciation and selfless action. You're welcome to rewind any portion of this video that is confusing to you or you need to study in depth. Of course you're welcome. It's your equipment that is allowing you to view this, and your payments to the companies that allow you access. So now we go on to illuminate more of Yasa's wisdom. Chapter 5, this chapter 5 discourse on action and renunciation reflects the perennial tension between engagement and withdrawal, work and meditation. Yasa, through Krishna's voice, affirms that wisdom is not the enemy of action, but its highest fulfillment. That bears repeating. Wisdom is not the enemy of action, but its highest fulfillment. Well, that's the fruition of a lot of action, a lot of research, a lot of referencing, a lot of absorption, a lot of allowing the great wisdom of the ages. Yoga is the great wisdom of the ages to come into your heart and your soul and find a seat in your mind and be there as a daily reminder of your morals and ethics. And I listed here some verses from the Gita. And I'm not going to go there because they're just a little bit boring. So we're going to skip down to examining this. They're not boring in the sense that they're not worthy of being read. I'm just trying to truncate this presentation for you. Examining the contributions of Shankara and Sakshi, myself, reveals the multi-layered wisdom Yasa imparts. Shankara's commentary weaves the metaphysical tapestry of non-dual realization, urging the aspirant to see beyond the play of action and inaction to the changeless self. Sakshi, in turn, myself in turn, bridges the ancient and the modern, emphasizing practical engagement and universal compassion. When I write these, I write in the third person because I'm just writing to an audience in general. When I read them, I have to take my third person out and go back to the first person, so it makes literary, acoustical sense to you as my listener. Okay, there's bullet points here. Shankara, the path of renunciation, is ultimately the path of knowledge. Well, that's redundant. When the mind is purified, knowledge dawns effortlessly. In other words, if you have a full cup, it's hard to pour fresh water into it because you already have some tepid water in there and maybe some aged water in the cup. So if you have an empty vessel, which is a purification of the mind, then you have room for new ideas and concepts, and you can focus on that new knowledge dawning upon your intellect and your soul. Shankara's focus is on the cessation of ego. Well, ego is the modern day, and it's been around for a while, modern, not just modern, but historically, it's the self. It's known as the self. Jung did various papers. The psychiatrist Sigmund Freud, who was Jung's teacher for a while, also did papers on it. There's been countless books written on the subject. Psychologists, psychiatrists use it all the time in their treatment and in their work with their patients. But the ego, to me, is just another part of the thinking system of the human personage. The ego really is not the important thing. In fact, it gets you in more trouble than it helps you most of the time. It's the soul, that little voice that whispers to you, that is the important thing to embrace in life. Because remember, as a child, you would say, oh, no, Mom told you not to eat those cookies, it'll spoil your supper. But being a child, you ignore any advice from anyone, especially when you're hungry and you have a sweet tooth, which gets you in trouble later in life, and you probably wind up with diabetes, like I did. But that's another subject. So Shankara focuses on the cessation of ego and the recognition of one's identity with Brahman. In other words, move more from the self towards the creator. After all, if we owe anything in this universe any amount of homage and respect and gratitude, it needs to be repaid with recognition of what our Creator has done for us. Most people will thank a taxi cab driver, most or an Uber driver nowadays. Most people will thank a waiter or a waitress. Most people will thank their lover, male or female. After a good making love session, most people will thank their teachers. In retrospect, I do for my high school teachers and others. But we often forget to thank the Creator. Well, and your mom and dad will sometimes remind you, you wouldn't be here without us. Well, who are they here by the power of? Well, they're here by the power of the same entity, the same Creator that you and I are here by the power of. That Creator. Okay. The wisdom of, this is my opinion now, the wisdom of Yasa through Sakshi's viewpoints is the invitation to live fully and freely, engaging in the world without being bound by it. See, you can be part of this world without taking on all its troubles and tribulations. You don't have to worry about every little news video that talks about something going on in some town in some country you barely know the location of geographically. Don't you have enough trouble at home? Don't you have enough problems internally and externally within your environment? Why take on the world when you're not even dealing with your own personal situation? They say that charity begins at home. I say that solving the problems of the world begins with ourselves. How can we be great teachers and great expounders of global and universal wisdom if we can't even solve our own petty problems? I truly believe that. Moving on now, the conclusion. Oh, we're almost at the conclusion. This is wonderful. Looks like I'm going to be able to create this in under 30 minutes, which was my goal. So the conclusion is chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita stands as a luminous guidepost to seekers torn between the call to action and the allure of renunciation. This was Yasa's wisdom, and he illuminated it through Shankara's philosophical rigor and my contemporary insight. It is illuminated through Shankara's philosophical rigor and my contemporary insight. The reason I back up and change the order of the words and the meaning of the words I'm saying is I'm an old author, and authors are constantly revising their text even as they're typing. Well, I can't revise my text as I'm speaking, but I can by re-emphasizing it in a new, meaningful dialogue. That's why I do that. I'm self-correcting. So this illuminated philosophical rigor of Shankara is there. I mean, he's very rigorous. I'm more contemporaneous. And so my contemporary insightfulness reveals that liberation is found not in the abandonment of action. I believe this, or I wouldn't have written it, nor in the fevered pursuit, but in the relinquishing, and I said this earlier, and you're going to see it come home here, that bird has come home to roost right here, but in the relinquishing of ego and the recognition of the self in all. I can put an addendum with that, and a recognition of the Creator in all. That's one of the major teachings of yogic philosophy. The Gita's teaching is thus timeless. So renounce the fruits of action, and then act with selfless dedication, and realize the unity behind all diversity. And there it is. And I'm glad I'm back to speaking live with you in person. I seem like I'm getting a lot more done than through that semi-artificial means of just pointing the camera at some stationary image for you and then letting an artificial AI-generated voice read my discourses to you. That's I apologize for doing that, but I had no choice. What I may do, and probably will do, in fact, I will do it, I will go back and physically, in person, create a video of each one of those 1, 2, and 3, and then I'll take those old ones down and put my fresh ones up. And that way the series will be in order and it will be properly administered. So now I'm going to close as I always do. What I want everyone to do is to be good to yourself. I want you to not only be good to yourself, but to pass that goodness on to friends, family, and even strangers. The idea of doing that to friends, family, and strangers. And who knows, if we're able to transmit this idea, this philosophy of goodness, treating each other well, which is an age-old concept. It's in most of the holy books, no matter what religion you're reading, religion you're practicing. But if we can pass on this goodness and this common decency and this civility to each other, who knows, someday, 5, 10, 20 years from now, we all may wake up to a whole new revised, speaking of revised world, and look around and say, how wonderful. Look at it now. This is the way it should have always been. Thank you, my friends, and hope to see you later.